Chapter 9. Kayla yawned, opened her eyes, and inhaled deeply. Kivaza's consciousness was contently napping deep within the recesses of her mind. Cyanide had insisted their first night together be purely sensual without any form of penetration at all. She just wasn't ready for that threshold to be crossed. She had discovered the one major threat Kayla had about their transformation and had vowed to one day discover precisely where the missing erogenous zones had moved to. Kayla had opted to let her consciousness drift throughout the evening. Neither of her selves had experienced sex before, and Kayla wanted Shinji to be her first. Over the course of her inner solitude, Kayla had spent a great deal of time evaluating her individual wants and desires and had come to some rather surprising conclusions. Kivaza and Kayla both had an appreciation for the female form, but Kayla preferred men. Kivaza seemed to prefer women, or maybe it was simply that a woman was the first to make the offer. She hoped after Kivaza was there as a part of Kayla having sex with Shinji, that the pendulum of Kivaza's attraction would swing in the other direction. The crack in the wall leading to the adjoining chamber glowed faintly from the pre-dawn light. Due to Hyrule's axial tilt and retrograde rotation, the sun rose from the northwest and set to the southeast. It has been that way since the cataclysm that had destroyed the planet Soral and cast Midguard out of the Havras system millions of years ago. Cyanide and Kivaza had fallen asleep in a rather peculiar tangle of limbs, and Kayla had no idea how to extract herself without rousing the other woman from her sleep. She slowly worked to pull her left hand from under Cyan's hip. The contrast between the gradation of her arm's skin tone, ranging from pure black to light brown against Cyan's alabaster flesh, had a pleasing aesthetic. She noticed Cyan's hips were slightly broader, with a waist narrower than her own, as she managed to carefully free her left arm. Kayla looked down and gently cupped Cyan's behind, squeezing cautiously. Kayla pouted. "That must be from all the time she spends working out," she muttered. As she released her hold, Cyan shifted her weight and rolled slightly to the left, freeing Kayla's right arm. Cyan's breasts were larger, but Kayla's were firmer. Kayla smiled happily. She was comfortable with her own build, but comparing physiques just seemed natural. Kayla swiftly liberated her right arm and tried to pull herself up into a seated position. Cyan rolled back over onto her stomach, with one arm on either side of Kayla's torso and her cheek resting on the triangular patch of fur between Kayla's thighs. Kayla froze in place, and inhaled deeply. There was a roughly half-inch wide, quarter-inch deep, trench on either side of Cyan's spine. On either side of the hollow were 3 deep impressions in her back which looked to be slightly wider than Kayla's fingers and nearly 2 knuckles deep. This is what the leech had done to the woman's back. "Cozy," Cyan muttered groggily as she rubbed her cheek against Kayla's lap. Kayla flushed, on the verge of panic. She breathed deeply while thinking back to Vorshana's words to her from over a year earlier. "You're just responding to physical stimulus. It doesn't mean you have any deep feelings or even attraction to the person causing the reaction. It feels good and your body is responding." The problem, in this instance, was that she did feel attraction to Cyan, but she couldn't tell if it was her feelings or Kivaza's desires overshadowing her own. "This is going to just drive me out of my mind until I get myself good and fucked," Kayla grumbled under her breath unhappily. Cyan yawned. Kayla looked down and tried to clear her mind before the woman could sense her thoughts. Cyan drew her arms down until her elbows were next to her ribs, rolled to the left, and rested her right hand on Kayla's inner thigh as Cyan's hair gently slid down the inside of her left thigh. The term damp no longer applied to the sensation Kayla was experiencing. "Damn it," Kayla whispered. Cyan angled her head slightly and exhaled heavily, sending her breath cascading across Kayla's thighs. Kayla's hips rolled back involuntarily. Cyan's mouth twitched slightly as her lips pressed tightly together. "Bitch," Kayla chuckled softly, "you're awake, aren't you? You're just toying with me." "Shush, I'm sleeping," Cyan said and then started giggling. Kayla bucked hard. Cyan pushed herself up into a kneeling position. I was just playing. You seem to be enjoying it, so I didn't see any harm. Besides, I'm not the one that fell asleep with their legs spread. Kayla shoved her hard enough to send Cyanide rolling backward. She laid there with one knee up and the other leg to the side, giggling as Kayla stared at her in confusion. In the depth of her mind, Kivaza was stirring. As the sun breached the horizon, a strip of light spread across the floor, flowing through the fissure in the wall. The light struck the far wall, rapidly spreading throughout the chamber and reflecting off the domed ceiling. "What's that look?" Cyan asked as she tried to regain her composure. "I should lead you back up top so we can both get dressed and start our day. I'll have to get this all rewired. Just remember to send me a note to let me know when you're going to Gestasio's." "You know that I'm Kayla," Cyan said. "Yes, I know. I can see the difference in your eyes." "Wait," Kayla said as Cyan propped herself up on her elbows in preparation for getting out of bed. "For what?" Kayla flushed in embarrassment, and bit her upper lip, but didn't answer. Cyan studied her momentarily, shifted her legs slightly, and burst out laughing. "What's so funny? Just ask." "Ask what?" "That's another major difference between you two," Cyan said with a playful grin. "Kivaza is a lot bolder. There's an honesty to that. Are you going to sit there staring between my legs or speak your mind?" Well," Kayla stammered. "Seeing as you don't know how to ask a simple question," Cyan teased. "Yes, we do normally have white hair down there too, but I had mine removed because it was really uncomfortable when a stray hair got caught in my armor." "No." Kayla blushed while shaking her head as if she was trying to dislodge the thought. "That's not it." "Then what pigment were you wanting to ask about?" Kayla lowered her head and blushed even brighter. "Oh," Cyan said with a smile. "You really are the emotional half, aren't you? I don't have a problem with letting you see, but I am going to make you ask." "What color is it?" "I've been told the specific shade is called pink lace," Cyan said as she repositioned herself on the bed to make sure she was well lit and parted her labia with 2 fingers. After Kayla had taken a peek, she moved her hand away. "Okay, now that we've resolved that controversy, let's get moving. We have a full day ahead of us." Cyan walked over to the generator, bent over, and picked up the handheld telepathic relay from where she'd left it the night before. "We have a problem," Cyan said after checking her messages. "Where did you get that thing on your head?" "The carbuncle? A beautician at the mall." "Why?" "I'm pretty sure it's a tracking device," Cyan said angrily. "We have to get moving." "What makes you think that?" "Remind me. Exactly who advised them to bring a tank?" "What?" "They're bringing a tank." "They who?" "I don't know, let's ask the tank," Cyan snickered. Cyan struggled to open a large, rectangular, metallic box. "You're sure they're looking for us?" "Not looking anymore. Do something about that thing so we don't make their jobs any easier." Kayla took the gemstone off her forehead and smashed it on the floor. "My defender caught part of a message while monitoring planetary security feeds. They were unloading a tank when he was nearing the gate. Needless to say, he just kept driving," Cyan said. "You're kidding." "Do I sound like I'm kidding?" "What do we do?" Kayla asked on the verge of panic. Kayla rushed to untie her tails. Cyan grunted and groaned as she tried to break the container's pressurized seal. "Can't you just?" Kayla began but stopped when she realized the soul stone around Cyan's neck had gone dark. "I used up the last of it last night. If I could make it to my cache, I'd be set. I'm pretty sure we have some unwanted guests keeping an eye on us while they get that fucking tank in position. I don't think strolling over there, naked, and asking if we can grab our things from my secret stash would go over too well." Cyanide cursed loudly and flung the crowbar across the room. "There's a monster that lurks within us, always," Kayla recited, the more you feed it the more it grows. The more attention you give it the faster it will consume you, but ignoring it completely leads to recklessness and death. Harness the monster, and it can be your greatest ally. What are you babbling about? It's something my mother taught me long ago. Fear is not a thing that can be reasoned with. Kayla said, it must be conquered and controlled. I get it, Cyan said, calm down and think. We just don't have much time, and without my soul stones I'm at a serious disadvantage. You were talking about wanting a partner, so let's do what partners do and work together. Kivaza and I have different approaches, but when we work together, we're at our best. Why? Because we can compensate for the other's weakness. Let us compensate for yours. Just let me know what course of action you take if you still had stones and I'll help, Kayla said. I'd start by casting looking glass on the wall so we can see what's going on out there, Cyan said. From there it depends on how many enemies we're dealing with. My range is limited to about 80 yards, without my leech, so I couldn't do anything about the tank till it's in range. I've never learned looking glass, and there's no time to teach me. I can pinpoint mines better than most, so that can help, but I've never tried mind games like you used at the mall or any kind of domination. Cyan looked at her scornfully, that registered as deceptive. If we're going to live through this, we need to be honest with each other. It's not a lie. I do have a way to hijack other people's minds, but it's not worth the risk. I can't target individual people. It affects everyone in range, starting with the closest people and keeps expanding outward. Last time I tried it I attracted the attention of a Cletharian queen. Cyan blinked in disbelief. What? You've seen? No, but I've touched the minds of 2 of them. What is your maximum range? Kayla blushed. I don't know. I think it depends on the size of the hive mind. The what? Cyanide yelled. Are you saying you can make a hive like a colmeon? No, Kayla said nervously. I've never come in contact with a colmeon or Xenon hive. I can connect with regular people, but both times I tried they died when I tried to disconnect. Well, other than the Cletharians. You're a weapon of mass destruction. In shock, it's no wonder PRI wants you so bad. That alien gland you said you have locked up in the shuttle. Is it? Yes, Kayla whispered. It's what makes a person a potential queen. Aisha did want me to find out why they wanted you so bad. I'm honestly glad this is how I found out. Why? Most likely, I would have been ordered to kill you. If I did, that would have left Korbajani as the only one who knew about that thing on your shuttle. Cyan grinned. Worse yet, I'd miss out on the best stripes in Corrales. I wouldn't be too happy about it either. Kayla snarled. Cyan walked over and retrieved the crowbar. I just hope I can pull this off, Cyan said with both excitement and fear in her voice, and that no one is recording the area. I'm not usually one to be embarrassed, but if I use them, I'll be breaking more than laws of decency. Is there another way out of here? Kayla asked as she looked at the crack in the wall. Not exactly, Cyan answered. We'll have to use the delivery hatch. These crates didn't get in here on their own. The heater exhaust vents through a grate on the surface. There are 2 problems with that plan. First, the access panel to open the grate is only accessible on the surface. You'd have to deal with the grate, but it has to be resealed after, otherwise animals will get in. Once the vent is open, I could manipulate the air currents. Wait, Cyan interrupted forcefully. What? I can't leave this behind, Cyan said as she lightly thumped the side of the box with the crowbar. Try to find a way to open it while I go grab something. What's in the box? It's hard to explain, Cyanide said as she walked over, and reached down the throat of the taxidermized Flanix's head, and carefully pulled out a long rifle made from a gray polymer. You have a rifle? Not that I can use it, Cyan admitted. It's meant to be mounted on a vehicle. It's too heavy to be used without at least a heavy tripod. The container could easily be mistaken for a wardrobe at a glance. It was almost 6 feet tall and 4.5 feet wide. There were no signs of hinges and only a narrow seam running the length of one side, which was far too narrow to be forced by a crowbar. I'm assuming this isn't a tripod, Kayla said with a smirk. Lucky for us, no, Cyan said as she shoved the heavy weapon across the floor toward the container. What kind of rifle is it? It's a 3 milliwatts ion rifle. I need the ion cores to power the other vehicle. The what? Kayla crossed her arms and tapped her foot on the ground with mild annoyance. Just find a way to get that box open, Cyan urged. Can you hear that? They're moving the tank into position, and I still need to open the vent. Cyan connected a small terminal to the generator and started typing frantically. Kayla rested her hand on the side of the dull gray container. The polymer was unresponsive to her ability to manipulate stone and metal. The material must be partially organic, most likely some kind of plasteel. She refocused her eyes, while walking around the box, looking for energy patterns across the surface of the container. While nearly undetectable, there were some slight traces of energy. However, they did not quite connect. It wasn't hard to tell where the patterns seemed to line up. Kayla rubbed her fingers together, calling on the latent energy in the surrounding atmosphere, creating sparks, and traced the distance from one line to the next until they were all connected. The door opened like a vault. Within the container was a set of 5-foot wings made from a material so black it was hard to focus your eyes on them. While it was difficult to make out the texture of the object, it seemed to have layered feather-like tips at the bottom. Between the wings was a harness designed to conform with the wearer's shoulders and back, and 2 straps intended to fasten across the torso, fastening in the center of the chest. Careful, Cyan cautioned, the edges of those wings are razor sharp. A clank followed by a series of clicks echoed through the room, as the ceiling vent began to open. Cyan rushed over and ejected the ion cores from the rifle and set to work inserting them into indents in the harness, one near each wing and the third by the small of the back. And where did you get them? Kivaza asked. They're called Ullervikal, Cyan explained while she carefully examined the inner lining of the apparatus. During the first major engagement against Ska, 2 of the Midnight Fortresses were crippled and their warlord slain. These beauties were owned by the Pharisine warlord. Zorik of then Shilither. That's him, but it's a fortress, not starbase. Fortresses are bigger. I met him once, Kayla said in surprise. He got in an argument with Baron Deloric over the use of fighters in combat. If he had launched enough fighters to support his fleet, he might have lived. Lucky for us, he didn't. Cyan trailed off for a moment. There they are. Cyan said triumphantly as she pulled a pair of gloves out of a compartment at the base of the assembly. Cyan continued. I found them while searching for survivors after the battle. I sort of stole them. There are only 4 of this type, 1 for each warlord. There are sets awarded to their best combatants, but they're made of more conventional materials. Hopefully, I can figure out how they work. I've seen them used. I fought someone who used the martial art that goes along with them. Once. So, your escape plan depends on figuring out how to use these things, Kayla yelled in dismay. The cavern shook. Sounds like they're starting their attack. Wish me luck. Cyan finished putting on the harness and rushed to put on the gloves. You'd make a gorgeous statue, Kayla said appreciatively. No wait at all, Cyan said as she stepped forward with the wings firmly in place. It must use Kid Alma Motion anti-gravity tech. Kayla walked underneath the vent and looked up and scowled. What? After you stepped out, the wings spread a little. There is no way we are fitting up this shaft. So, what are we going to do? Wait for them to punch a hole in the wall and hope the ceiling doesn't collapse. Or do you want me to widen the crack over there? Yeah, the crack. That's a great idea. We'll just go out the front door, Cyan exclaimed. The right wing rose as Cyan raised her left elbow. Oops, Cyan said as she switched the fingerless gloves to the opposite hands. She rolled her shoulders forward and shot up toward the ceiling, then rolled them back to descend to the floor. I think I have it. Is that hole big enough yet? Cyan asked urgently. As Kayla slowly spread her arms, the fissure slowly parted, just wide enough for Cyan to pass through with the wings behind her. The force field barrier flickered as they both stepped into the entry to the chamber. I have an idea. How's your aim, and how fast can your tails move? Cyan asked with a grin. Why? Kayla asked. Because we're getting my soul stones out of my cache. We can come back for the rest of it later. Then they will know where the cache is. Can't we just get out of here? We can come back for all of it later. Okay, here goes nothing, Cyan said, stepping just inside the doorway with the left wing extended to provide cover from the attack. She motioned Kayla over and instructed her to hold on tight. I'll try, Kayla responded, wrapping her arms tightly around Cyan's waist and crossing them behind the woman's back. Cyan reached around her and placed her hand on the control panel for the force field. With the left wing still in front of them, Cyan rushed forward and jumped. The wings wrapped around the two women as they rocketed across the pit. They could hear projectiles ricocheting off of the outer surface of the wings, as they flew down the well-trod path leading toward the old colony site. They passed over the ruins, the wings spreading forward and back. Kayla, Cyan said nervously. Yeah? It just crossed my mind. The people in the guard tower aren't going to have any idea who or what we are, and I have no idea how to dodge. We could just go up, Kayla responded. Cyan arched her back and started descending before rolling her shoulders back. They shot up into the air. Find me a place to land. Now. Why? Quick, before we're targeted by the orbital defense grid. The founding tree is shielded. I see it. Going down. Slow down, Kayla shouted just before they collided with the founding tree. The moments that followed were confusing and chaotic. At some point, Kayla lost her grip on Cyan. Whether it was before or after was hard to discern. Her tails had lashed out frantically trying to slow and direct her fall as she passed through the dense yellowed foliage. Kayla was scratched, battered, and bruised by the branches. Her ears were ringing from the thunderous cracking noise of the impact. She laid motionless on the ground, waiting for the spinning to stop. She heard the tree creaking and the sound of leaves and twigs scraping across the ground. She struggled to remain conscious as everything slowly went black. Chapter 10. Kayla and Kivaza sat trapped within the very core of their shared mind. The usual rings of stone did not separate them as they usually did, and neither of them had even a single tail. The fire between them flickered, threatening to go out. They sat, cross-legged, tending the fire. The wood seemed darker than usual, and the mist beyond seemed to be shifting and churning as if it had some strange will of its own. Regeneration alone can't fix this, Kivaza said. We should be able to wake soon, but the damage is extensive. This wasn't my fault, Kayla objected. She hit a tree. Our tails guided us down. I don't understand why our body is this damaged. Kivaza frowned darkly. I never said it was your fault. There are things done, but that doesn't matter right now. I just hope Cyan survived. We're injured. Why are you so focused on her? Kayla asked. Our regenerative ability is still active, Kivaza said while tending the fire, but something is interfering with it. That last noise we heard. I think it was a branch falling on us. while I keep this burning, how about you take a walk? Are you sure you can keep it burning without me? You know what happens if the fire goes out. We die, Kivaza said in an unnervingly calm voice. Go, while we still have the strength. Just try not to be too long. With any luck, Cyan will be able to get the branch off of us before Pri or Korbajani's people show up. What about the other queen? Kayla asked nervously. Just be careful, Kivaza said. The queen on this side of Keralis is the old queen. The same one that was involved in our creation. The second queen is the real threat. Kayla stared into the dwindling flames and listened to the rhythmic sound of Kivaza rearranging the wood within the fire pit with a long, charred stick. She could feel her awareness expanding. The founding tree had been split diagonally from a few feet up from the bottom to the new jagged top of the tree, which was closer to 35 instead of 50 feet tall. One of the larger branches had been cleaved when the top was shattered by the impact. While floating around in her disembodied state, she could see her tail sticking out from underneath the branch. She knew the rest of her body was underneath there as well, but she couldn't see it through the branches and dense yellowed foliage. She couldn't see Cyan or the wings from this vantage point. She's tried projecting her consciousness in the past, but this time felt different. She felt like she had more control. She could feel the minds of the people in the city below, the inhabitants moving around on the surface. With a little more effort she could feel the minds of people in nearby star systems, the felinoid Karzon in the Carmel and Mad Jir, the dog-like Kamenov the Aramin and Dakari, the wolf-like Lupians of Vok, Zalf, and Baikal. At the edge of her perception, she could feel the inhabitants of a colony in the Nairobi system, screaming out in fear and pain. It was like a shock wave vibrating through her entire being. They were all just distractions. She was out here for a reason, not a psychic tour of the galaxy. She had to find Cyan and get the woman's help. But the tortured minds seemed to be pulling her away. In her altered perception, she could see thread-like cords reaching out into the distance like a spiderweb. Not far from the current location of her consciousness, there was a large node where 4 sturdy strands met like a knot in the latticework. The knots seemed to be shifting subtly. Without much concentration, she could feel where the thoughts of anguish were coming from. The nearest intersection within the web seemed to be slowly moving as if in response. She tried to pull away and return back to where she was meant to be, but the strange node and the distressed minds continued to draw her in. Hopefully Kivaza could keep the fire burning a little bit longer. Kayla focused on the intersection of the threads and drew closer. It was alive. She could see a strange creature within the blackness of space with tentacles reaching outward, carefully manipulating the strings. A multifaceted crystalline shell was on its back. Space Nautilus. That's new, she thought to herself. Turning her attention towards the location of the Nairobi system, she could see a tall white spire pulsating with psychic energy. It's amplifying their thoughts and transmitting them. But who? Why? She saw a black silhouette in space between the two. Kayla turned her attention towards the ship. Before she could home in on the minds present, she heard a familiar voice say a single word, fire. Kayla's consciousness seemed to collapse in on itself as the node vanished with the nautiloid's death. She felt alone, cast adrift. The voices from the colony site had fallen silent. The range of her abilities had diminished. One of her tails felt heavy and limp. Focusing on the other two, she could feel the threads that connected to each of the tails and used those threads to carefully guide herself back to her body. Kivaza looked up at her. The fire was mere embers. I said, get help. Hurry. I tried, Kayla responded. I don't know where Cyan is, and I think something terrible just happened. I'm more concerned with staying alive. Kayla found that she was unable to step out of her body to continue her journey. I'm trapped. I think that thing in space is somehow linked with our abilities, or at least mine. I found our body though. We're stuck under a tree limb. If I focus on the ground around it, do you think you could lift it using your abilities? Kayla grabbed a nearby stick and started poking at the fire. Find where the branches hit the ground and I'll do the rest, Kivaza said. Kayla rendered a three-dimensional visualization of the area where their body laid. Kivaza manipulated the ground to carefully raise the branch off of their body. The fire rekindled, burning brightly. We should be able to move in a minute or so, but it's going to hurt. A lot. So, who's going to take charge of our body? Kayla asked. A strange, faraway look passed across Kivaza's face. Somebody's pulling us by the ankles. I tell you what, if it's Shinji, you can take control. If it's Cyan, I'll take the helm. Shinji's most likely had some instruction on how to handle injured people. With Cyan this would be more understandable. If it's Shinji we may have to beat him later. Why? Our Kobitom's regeneration has reconnected our spinal cord, but some vertebrae are still cracked. Dragging us by the ankles is reckless. Kivaza sneered then added. Whoever loses our little wager will be responsible for pain suppression. What if it's not either of them? Kivaza grinned. We'll just have to fight over who gets to kill them first. Kayla's eyes fluttered open. Thank you, Shinji, she said weakly. Shinji looked down at her with concern in his eyes. Are you okay? One of Kayla's brown tails reached up and wrapped, weakly, around his hand. I will be. But where's the other person I was with? Shinji paused and looked at her with confusion. I didn't see anyone else, but, right now, I need to get you out of here. Do you think you can walk, or am I going to have to? Never mind. I'll carry you. Be careful, I don't think I fully healed. He rested one hand behind her shoulders, slipped the other beneath her legs, and strained to try to lift her. Kayla's three tails reached out and braced themselves against the ground, moving in tandem with Shinji as he carried her to the car. Every movement was agony, yet her tails were still able to move despite the spinal damage. Her tails consisted of almost entirely of muscle and cartilage. First chance we get, I'm going to put you on a scale, Shinji teased. I don't understand how you can weigh this much. You're what? About 5 feet 7 inches and look like you weigh about 100 pounds soaking wet. After that impact, I'm surprised I haven't lost a few pounds in unfortunate locations. Looks like you still have all of your arms, legs, and tails. Losing one of those isn't the best weight loss plan. As Shinji carried her to the car, Kayla glanced over her shoulder. There was no sign of Cyan. However, the black wings were partially embedded in the rooftop of a building that had sunk into the crater during the last attack on the system. Kayla's consciousness was dragged down within herself. She felt as though her mind was being pulled and restrained by Kivaza. Shinji, I need you to do something. I need your communicator. Now, Kivaza said forcefully as he lowered her into the car, then returned to the depths of their psyche. Shinji handed her his tablet. Will this do? Kayla rested 2 fingers on the pendant around her neck. I know her contact information is here. Shinji scowled. That's the wrong kind of interface. Damn it. You see the wings over there on the top of that building? Shinji nodded in response. There should be a lamentic attached to them. I need you to help her. They put out a call, earlier, to local security. They can handle it. When I heard about the tree, I had the sneaking suspicion you were involved. I came here to get you out of the area. She's not my concern. That's not acceptable, Kayla insisted. I need you to get her out of there now. Someone is going to have to accept responsibility. Shinji began to say while motioning toward the tree. She's naked, Kayla said irritably. Shinji paused in confusion. Are we talking about that lamentic who kissed you at the mall yesterday? That's the one. I'll get right to it, Shinji answered in a strangely apologetic tone. So are we, Kivaza thought back angrily. Would you like me to get you your things out of the back? Shinji asked. Kayla wondered if he'd overheard the thought. She comes first. I'm in no condition to dress myself at the moment. Shinji removed his jacket and draped it over the roof of the car. I'll try to remember that, he teased. What happens if someone else comes first? Kayla smirked. Save yourself the pain and give up on that little fantasy. Shinji swiftly unbuttoned his shirt. What are you doing? Cover up with this, Shinji said as he handed her his shirt. I'll cover her up with my coat. Kayla's black tail reached up to take the shirt from Shinji. Go get my friend. Preferably before yours get here. What do you mean, my friends? Security. Oh. I did want to get you out of here before they got here so you wouldn't get in trouble for breaking the tree, but I don't think you have anything to worry about from local security. Shinji, you said you heard security mention what happened here, and you said you rushed down here to get me. Don't underestimate me. If you suspected that I was involved in the tree, then you had to have known which direction I came from. Shinji grinned at her sheepishly. Yeah, I might have heard that there was a problem out by the old ruins. Yeah, about that problem. There were security forces that were sent to collect the two of us. I had nothing to do with that. Kayla struggled through the pain to slip the shirt on. Shinji scowled every time she winced. Shinji, Kayla said softly, they sent a tank. 2 of them, actually. Who ordered it? Shinji looked down at the ground in disgrace. Korbajani's orders. The snake dies tonight. Go get my friend. Yes, Lady Darkseid, Shinji replied in a formal tone, closed the car door, and then headed over to gather some broken limbs from the tree to make a simple bridge to the rooftop. We better find a way to get healed up quick, Kivaza thought from deep within her. Korbajani's a major threat, and I'm not sure we can take him down without a little help, Cyan. Sounds like you have this all planned out. We did plan it out last night, but that was before we got injured. I'm not sure the plan will work now, but if Korbajani is this determined to target us, we are going to need to take our chances. What's the plan? Kayla asked internally. Maybe you should have paid more attention last night. You might have learned something. Like what? Kayla scoffed. Bruja had a strange attraction to us. Shinji has an attraction to us. And even Cyan was drawn to us. Of the 3 of them, only Cyan could explain why. Even with that knowledge, she still wanted me of accord without our usual manipulations. What manipulation? What are you talking about? Cyan said it's simply referred to as a lure. It's apparently a property that we simply possess. It's innate. People just feel drawn to us. She also suggested that it is something we should learn to control. Allure? Is that some sort of sex thing? No, Kivaza scoffed. When she explained it to me, she said that there are a few species that possess this trait. One of which is the Cheshire. Has it ever struck you as strange that as annoying as they are, people are still willing to put up with them? That's the effect of allure. Now for the real question. Why is Shinji drawn to you? Better question. Why is it me and you now? I thought we were trying to be united. Kivaza fell silent. Kayla grinned smugly. And that tells me what about the plan? All you need to know is, Cyan will be there. Don't acknowledge her. Well, as long as she's not hurt too badly. I'm kinda surprised that guard, defender, whatever he is, isn't here to get her. I'm a little worried about Shinji being the one going in there, Kayla thought. He'll be fine, as long as he doesn't do something stupid. As for her defender, do you honestly think she had time to contact him before impact? You seem really worried about her. I am, Kivaza admitted. I'm sure she's fine. How can you be so sure? I'm a more skilled telepath than you. I can sense these things. Before long, Shinji had assembled a makeshift ramp down from the edge of the crater to the roof where the wings had crashed. Apparently, news made its way down to the mall goers about the fate of their founding tree. Several onlookers had come up from the elevator to gawk at the damage. Be careful, Kayla thought to Shinji, as he worked his way down into the building. Kayla sat and waited quietly in the car. She could hear sirens in the distance. That was most likely the rest of the security forces on their way. Hurry, she thought to Shinji. I'm doing my best. Your friends are on the way. I'm trying to get the harness unfastened, and I can't quite reach it. Kayla giggled softly as she pictured Shinji jumping up and trying to reach the buckle for the harness like a child trying to reach a cookie jar on the highest shelf. Kivasa's consciousness resting deep within her mind was filled with fury and fear. Kayla smiled to herself. She'd never realized that her other self could feel fear. Perhaps it was just that Cyan was the one in danger. Or, maybe, that Kivasa had no control over the situation. What was it about this strange pale woman? That's enough, Kivasa thought from deep within her. Kayla smirked. You're the one who thought I should know your mind. A moment of panic seized Kayla as a car screeched to halt directly behind her. She turned her head at the sound of a car door opening and closing loudly, and breathed a sigh of relief that it wasn't security. Kayla opened the door with one of her brown tails and called out to the Udbar. Wait. Over here. He turned his head to face her. Make it quick. Nice shot, by the way, Kayla said as she glanced down at the bruise on her calf. Oh, that is you, the Udbar replied. What's the situation? She should be still attached to the wings over there. You'll need to make arrangements to get the wings out of there. A friend of mine is getting her now. Anything I need to know about this friend? He's a guy, Kayla said with a shrug. Got it, the Udbar said coldly as he turned to head towards the building. Roughly 36 people were now on the surface taking pictures of the tree and crashed wings. The Udbar moved into position and stood near the edge of the crater, looking down at the rooftop. Shinji emerged through the roof. Kayla was startled at just how pale the green-skinned Udbar turned at the sight of Shinji carrying Cyan on his shoulders. He had taken the time to put her arms through the coat so she would be somewhat covered, at least. However, even from the distance where she sat, she could see where one of Shinji's hands was gripping Cyan's inner thigh with her breasts pressed against his bare shoulder. The coat was hanging open, leaving her breasts partially exposed. He obviously had not expected a crowd to have assembled. Otherwise, he would have had her head facing towards the crowd rather than the opposite end. While some filmed, others took pictures. The Udbar leapt onto the roof and said something to Shinji. Kayla refocused her eyes and could see a bright red glow around the Udbar. That's her defender, Kayla thought urgently to Shinji. He's a shade. Just do what he tells you to. She watched as Shinji very carefully turned to allow the defender to take Cyan off of his shoulders. The Udbar jumped up onto the edge of the crater, sprinting to the car with Cyan in his arms. Kayla breathed a sigh of relief. She had no idea what the Udbar had said, but she could feel his killing intent all the way from the car. Shinji walked back up the ramp and headed towards the car. Well, that was a little scary. What did he say to you? If any of that footage hits GodNet, he's gonna. Well, I don't think it's physically possible, but it's certainly a unique threat. He's a shade. For him, it's probably possible. Cyan's car pulled away from the curb and sped off. I don't know about that, Shinji thought with amusement. Beating someone to death with their own spine? They tend to die when you rip the spine out. Just don't talk to me about spines right now, Shinji. Please. After getting back to the car, Shinji sped off taking Kayla to the hospital. They were well down the street by the time security arrived at the mall. So, what actually happened last night? Shinji asked. Why do you ask? Kayla asked irritably. Well, Shinji started, I was told to head home to the barracks. I was told you would not be returning, but that you would contact me this morning. Next thing I find out is that you and that lamentic woman took a naked flight directly into the founding tree. There has to be a story behind that. Yeah, and it involves a pair of tanks. Okay, but why were you both naked? It's easier to swim without your clothes. Shinji paused for a moment as they took a corner. Did something happen? It's really none of your business, but we did have a nice little workout. What kind of workout? We went jogging and then had a swim to cool down. And, no, you're not going to get any mental images out of me this time. Can't blame a guy for trying. According to who? Shinji remained silent until they pulled up in front of the hospital. You know, I'm starting to think you're all about the said accusingly. Well, honestly, it was a nice little fantasy you put in my head yesterday, but you're the one I want, Shinji replied. Kayla smiled. His answer felt honest, but meaning and intent affect truthfulness.